One, two, three. Mic testing.
Glad to be here. Product marketing team for Acrobat.
Hi Pooja, thank you for being here. I think we're going to discuss today how what the role of AI is going to be in the future generations and how to prepare them for it, right? So my first question before we start, right, is what do you think is the scale at which AI will impact the future generations?
Hi Kashyap, glad to be here. And I would say before we step into the future, let me just set a little bit of context in terms of where we've been and how what is happening today in terms of the technology shift and the data shift is going to impact education. So if you look at education, education has always gone in lockstep with the socio-economic structures of the time.
Okay.
And if you just go back of say 30, 40,000 years, you see three big transitions from a hunter-gatherer society to an agricultural society to an industrial society, and now we are moving towards a technology and data-led society, which we are kind of smack in the middle of right now. And if you see the education systems that have evolved along with it, when as hunter-gatherers, what it meant was that, one generation would pass on the skills of working with stone tools or making art in caves to the next generation. When we transitioned to agricultural societies, there was some form of writing that evolved, whether it was the Mesopotamian civilization or the Indus Valley civilization, and there were clay tablets on which people actually kept track of the agricultural produce and so on. Some bit of religious education also started to happen. And in transition to the industrial society, which was kind of precipitated by the printing press invention in 15th, 16th century, and then also some of the scientific discoveries and inventions that happened in anywhere from 17th to 19th century, right? That just changed the way the society worked, the economics worked, kind of it was a lot of factories being set up. In terms of the economic structure, we moved from coins and barter to kind of notes and currency systems, right? And that of course had implications for the education system. So the education systems that we see today are pretty much a remnants of that industrial revolution era, where it was a factory model of education. And if you look at the education system today, you can just kind of take a bird's eye view. You think of it as a box, right? Where it was designed for that factory model of education, lifespans of about 50 to 60 years. So there is kind of this box for K through 12 education, and there is this box for higher education. 14 years for K through 12 education and 4 years for your higher education. All children who are born, anywhere between 3 to 5 will go into this box for K through 12 education. This box is kind of managed by some of the institutions. It could be the government, it could be the boards, the CBSE board, the ICSE board, the school management. And then, after 12th grade, you come out of that box powered with some of the skills. You know how to read, you know how to write, you know how to do the basic math. You have some general vocabulary around science, around history, geography, civics, and so on, right? And then you decide to go into the university, and there is again that 4-year box where you more flexibility than K through 12. But it's still a box, and then you go out and then you can start working, say at 22, 23, and you assume that by and large this education will suffice you for life and will enable you to work for 30, 40 years, after which you retire and live your years,
Correct.
right?
I think you have set the context very well now, and your one of the themes that was predominant in your answer was that the education system, right? And recently, while the education system has been in a box, it has been evolving. For instance, the NEP 2020 introduced very contemporary subjects like AI. But my question to you is how is it possible? Is it possible to actually impart knowledge on subjects as complex as AI to children, what is the impact that it can have on the kids?
Absolutely. So, as we look forward, what is happening is, if you look at the blockchain based technologies or Web3 based technologies, the role of the institution or the central authority, whether it be a platform or an institution, is diminishing somewhat, and education is getting democratized. So, a student has a lot more flexibility in defining their learning journey, right? And you can personalize your learning starting from very early ages. Even 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds can decide that I want to learn more about video editing, and they have the tools to do that today, right? So when you look at specifically a technology like AI, we can't, it's a very complex technology. It requires a lot of strong cognitive skills, data management capabilities, coding, structuring, all of that, right? And, a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old might not be able to do all of these things. But when you're looking at K through 12 education, what are we doing for these children? What are we? We are providing them some of the tools and some of the vocabulary that they are going to encounter in their higher education or in their professional lives. So why do we teach children differential calculus or integral calculus or quantum mechanics, right? I learned differential calculus and I've never used it since I graduated from college.
I'm still scared of the integral calculus.
Side, right? But we are all, if you are doing some level of math until 12th, you are given some introduction to differential and integral calculus. In the same way, as I was saying, this whole, the three literacies that the education system focused on, which is reading, writing, numeracy, and some bit of general knowledge. Now what we need to add is next gen tech, because children need to be equipped with the vocabulary for that, what it is capable of doing, how you can bring to bear some of these very powerful tools to solve the problems that they will be called upon to solve, or they might already be thinking about, right? So, for example, now there are these platforms, right? I was reading about these platforms where you can convert text to video.
Okay.
So, using AI,
Yeah.
you can say, I am looking for an astronaut riding a white horse in the prairies. And you write it down, or you even say it, and it will actually create a physical video.
Correct.
That will make that happen, right? So, that power is available. And when we are talking about K through 12 education, or children from 13 to 18 years of age, they're already thinking about these real world problems. And they need to have access to some of this information and tools, and also the vocabulary, to be able to bring these to bear. While they might not be able to program it, while they might not be able to understand all of the mechanics under the hood, but a high level understanding of AI and the next generation technologies enables them to bring these technologies to bear as they look to solve some of these problems.
Okay.
So in short, I would say add one more critical skill that is required, which is the technology and data numeracy,
Okay.
which involves coding and understanding of technologies.
Yeah. You talked about vocabulary, right? And introducing vocabulary is probably, and I think that makes sense, right? So, for instance, when I learned civics, I learned how the Indian political system is in school. I didn't understand how it actually pans out in the real world, to be fair, because that's way more complex than this. But this vocabulary helps us understand, and these are the conversations we can partake in as we grow up. But is now this, while we are imparting this vocabulary, the vocabulary needed for AI or technology as complex, probably very few teachers also have access to this kind of knowledge, right? Many, and considering we should consider India as the diverse country that it is, this knowledge is very limited. Do you think we need to upskill the teachers also in the first place, and how do we do, if yes, how do we do that?
Absolutely. So, Kashyap, if you think about the key stakeholders in the education system, right, it is, of course, the student, the teacher, the parent, and some kind of institution, school, government, policy, a body that makes policies, right? Any education system is incomplete without the student and teacher interaction. If you look at, again, we go back to 30, 40,000 years, the mechanics might have changed, the structures might have changed, the power equation might have changed, but one thing that remained very constant is the interaction between the student and the teacher. The nature of it has evolved and has changed significantly. In this whole industrial model of education, we have gotten to a point where we say, look, you create this curriculum, you create these lesson plans, and you take it to that level where any teacher can actually go out and teach, right? Or, there are of course all of those non-cognitive skills that you get from your teachers, the ability to communicate, the ability to bounce back from failures. So all of that is a very integral part, but that is not talked about when it comes to teaching. When it comes to teaching, it is about taking the curriculum and running your lesson plans, right? And saying, okay, you have to cover the syllabus. You think of the teacher and say, I have to cover my syllabus and make sure my children do well in exams. That's what kind of a large
Read the
part.
chapter and that's it.
And the second thing is that most people might not know, but teachers end up spending more than 50% of their time in admin related tasks. These forms need to be filled. These assessments need to be done. Parent queries need to be answered. Planning for next semester needs to be done, or next year needs to be done. All of that. So about 50% of their time goes in admin work and not teaching per se.
This is an overarching problem.
This is an overarching problem. So, have you heard of Dr. Ashok Goyal? So, Dr. Ashok is a computer science and AI prof in Georgia Tech. And his course was a very popular one. The number of students kept increasing, and he was trying to answer all the different queries. So he got an assistant and called her Jill Watson. And, even as the student numbers increased, he said, you have any questions, you can just send to Jill and we'll get them answered. And for a very long, and students would get their answers very, very quickly. After some time, what everybody figured out, or Dr. Ashok actually revealed, was Jill Watson was actually a chatbot, an AI-enabled chatbot. And now, I think it was started in 2016, and now it's a very vast database, many knowledge bases, because what Dr. Ashok figured was that there were a set of questions that students encountered and stumbled on, and he created a whole knowledge base, and it was an AI-enabled chatbot that started to answer these queries, and it led to very high satisfaction levels among students as well, and the numbers that he was able to then address or teach went up significantly as well. So that's the world we live in today. And when we talk about use of AI in education, there are two parts to it. The reason I brought about the whole kind of learning and teaching aspect and the admin aspect is that it's a significant part, this 50%. So when we talk of AI in education, there is a part which is how do we make the life of the teacher easy or simpler, or take some of the load off, where we can take off the repetitive tasks off her plate and use technology or AI-enabled systems to do
AI
that.
to teach AI.
AI to teach AI. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is one part of it. And the other, of course, is the teaching part of it, where children need to learn this. And, so of course, I think the upskilling of teachers will be required. In fact, the power of the teachers in this equation will go up, because the skills required will be significant because so much of the mundane stuff, everything that is associated with rote memorization, kind of standard procedure can be automated, can be handled through technology, through data. The teacher will be called upon to perform more higher order level tasks, which is being able to motivate children to learn, being able to give some support to the curiosity of the children and help them kind of find pathways to fulfill their curiosity, to bounce back from failures. And we saw that during COVID. Everybody said, okay, COVID, because of technology, children can learn from home, on devices, so much more efficient. They don't have to waste 1 hour going in the bus to the school. But what we are realizing after 2 years of at-home learning is the learning outcomes have been very poor for children.
Yeah, the human touch is necessary.
Human touch is very necessary.
Yeah.
So the teachers will need upskilling. What I'm saying is not just in the tech part of AI, but more on the non-cognitive skills and the human touch that we need to really inspire the children to continue to learn and proceed down the path fueled by their curiosity.
Yeah. Now, considering that, let's just, in a hypothetical world, let's consider that we have all the resources, right? We have a possibility of humans teaching in person, as well as we have various technologies to access it. What do you think are the different ways, or I want to rather ask, what are some of the creative ways that we can make learning subjects like AI interesting? Because we talked about imparting knowledge through vocabulary, but I don't think just vocabulary or a theoretical knowledge, it would get too boring for kids, right? Especially subjects like AI, deep learning, they're too mathematical. What are some of the creative ways to, kind of include them in the process and involve the children and let them learn and grow?
So, Kashyap, you answered it yourself, which is how do you make it more interactive? Very simple. Get children to interact a lot more with hardware, software, with people who are working with those technologies, and in environments. Place them in environments where they are exposed to some of these technologies in action. So get them out of the classroom, into the labs, into companies where these technologies are being used or being built and shaped, environments where some of the policies and guidelines are being developed for use of these technologies in our society. So, one of the phenomenon that is very evident now is learn as you earn and earn as you learn. We are increasingly moving away from the system where, you have this box for K through 12 education for 14 years and then the university box for 4 years, and you've given everything, and during this period children are in the classroom building on all the skills, and then you move out and go out into the world ready with those skills which will serve you in good stead for your 30-40 years of working life. No longer true. what we see more and more happening is children are doing internships as early as 15, 16 years of age. And while they might not be able to contribute meaningfully in an AI company or in a robotics company, but the exposure they get from doing that is immense. Even in college now, what I'm seeing is pretty much every child seems to be doing an internship between first and second year, second and third year, third and fourth year. And part of it is the pace at which change is happening. If you try to bring that to the classroom environment, technology has already moved a few steps ahead. So it is very critical that there is a seamless flow between the classroom and the real world environments where real world problems are being solved, and the classroom where the theory and the vocabulary is being built upon.
So now, I think now we talked about the ideal world, right? But let's now consider India as a country, and we are all aware of the socio-economic disparities that we live in. I remember working in college in an NGO where we used to make offline e-learning facilities available, right? Because the accessibility is not there. And which brings me to my next question. Forget availability of labs to make sessions interactive. We don't have electricity in many places. How do we make the education or the classes of AI or the knowledge of AI accessible to each and everyone within the country? Is that possible?
It's a very big question of our time, Kashyap, and a very big, both an opportunity and a risk. There is, because of the technology and the infrastructure that has been laid and is available, there is an opportunity to reduce this disparity significantly. But there is also a risk that if we do not do it right, then this inequality is only going to increase. And we are seeing that happen already. Again, in the 2 years of COVID, we saw that, where, because it was so technology led, there were a lot of families and a lot of children who actually fell out of the education system because they didn't have access to devices, they didn't have access to internet connections, their parents couldn't afford it. And that's where I say the fourth stakeholder comes into play, the government, the policies, the not-for-profits that can make that happen. With NEP 2020, you talked about, a lot of the guidelines have been set up. But before that, there was a very powerful initiative by the Indian government called the Atal Tinkering Labs. So Atal Tinkering Labs have been set up in almost 20,000 schools across India. And some of these schools are in tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 towns. And I visit a lot of these labs, and I do hear this complaint that, teachers are not equipped to use it. These labs have been set up and they are still not being used. But the truth is that they are there. Children who are curious about it have access to that hardware. And at least that first step has happened. And now the next step of training these teachers and empowering the teachers and students is underway. So some of these government initiatives play a huge role in enabling that. And I hear that there is, I was talking to the director of Atal Innovation Mission, and there is a plan to really take some of these labs to the hinterlands and the smallest of towns and villages. And that's a massive step forward. NEP 2020 talks about vocational skills. So while we, think about coding and really high-end applications of these technologies, when it comes to robotics, use of sensors, building some of these products, these vocational skills are very high in demand today. And our education system somehow has veered in that direction of it being very theoretical until 12th grade.
Yeah.
And then also when you look at our engineering preparation, it is more geared towards research. So now that with NEP 2020 there's focus on vocational skills, there are a number of universities that have been set up to empower these vocational skills is a huge step forward. Again, at Avishkaar, we have a number of hardware engineers who are coming out of these vocational setups, and they're doing a phenomenal job of kind of pulling some of these products together. So that is second. The third is, a lot of the NGOs, like I almost visualize a Khan Academy for next gen tech. Khan Academy democratized education for math, started with math and then reading and history and so on, right? But I don't see, and the time is actually right to have an organization or a Khan Academy for next gen tech where you have an understanding of robotics and AI and coding and IoT and sensors, and you can actually apply it. Even a 16-year-old, 17-year-old can apply it. So at Avishkaar, when we talk about next gen tech and coding and AI, we have created some of these kits where even a 5-year-old can make a basic snap and fit robot and program it. And the idea is not that they will know robotics. The idea is that you get exposed to the idea that you do something on the computer, on the screen, and a physical thing can move. And you can make it do what you want it to do.
Okay, so I think what I'm getting is there are a lot of stakeholders involved, and I think earlier you mentioned there are three main players in this, right? The students, the parents, and the policymakers, which can include various government bodies, etc. Right? Any final message to these stakeholders?
I think we need to think about in robot-proof education, for the lack of a better word, where brilliant machines work alongside humans. And that's the world we are living in and gradually and very rapidly moving towards. So while historically kind of the three literacies of reading, writing, and numeracy have served us well, now there are additional areas that we need to focus on. And in my mind, three big areas. One is the data literacy. So we are living in this world filled with data and information. There is no lack of resources for information. The challenge is to really analyze and utilize that data effectively. So our children need to be equipped with the necessary tools to utilize and analyze this massive data which is just growing at an exponential rate. Second is technology literacy. Any field you take, whether it is law, literature, science, technology is a very critical part of a solution that is needed to solve a real world problem. So children need to have a basic understanding of what this next gen tech or exponential technologies look like, be it robotics or AI or IoT or next generation, which is quantum computing. And the third is the human literacy. Because as we are bombarded with all of this data and information and change, it is very important for the next generation, the children, to understand how we behave, why we behave the way we do, how we think, the meta layer of, why are they doing what they're doing? How do we make better decisions? Because, we in our lives probably made much fewer decisions than what these children will be called upon to do in their professional careers. We changed our jobs probably 2-3 times on an average. These children will be changing their jobs every 1 or 2 years, and because the frequency and amplitude of change has really increased. And it's kind of visible, right, with the great resignation and a lot of young professionals, millennials, just defining the way they want to work and being very flexible in terms of how they want to work, where they want to work, what kind of work they want to do. So those are the three big areas we need to add to our literacy skills, which is the data literacy, the technology literacy, and the more importantly, the human literacy.
So data, technology, and humans. Those are the three. I think we will be talking about these subjects in more detail in our upcoming event, Cypher. It's our flagship event, and I think you're also speaking at the event, right?
Yes.
Are you looking forward to it?
Oh, absolutely looking forward to it. I was at Rising and loved the energy at the event, so look forward to Cypher and meeting some wonderful people there.
On that note, thank you so much, Pooja, for coming today.
Thank you.